Hello, and welcome to the Sound on Sound People and Music Industry podcast with me, Sam Inglis. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Frédéric Brun. Frédéric is the founder of Arturia, who are celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, which is a pretty remarkable achievement. Welcome, Frédéric.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's always great to see you. And congratulations on a milestone in the history of your company.
Yes, it's exciting. You know, we're happy to be here. We're happy to do this trade. We enjoy so much doing and delivering instruments and serving musicians. It's so enjoyable. So yes, happy to be here after 25 years and going on.
I thought for this podcast we might take a bit of a dive into the history of Arturia. So perhaps we should begin by going right back to the first Arturia product, which, if I'm right, was a thing called Storm. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a product we released back in 1999. We showed it in 1999, and we presented it at NAMM in year 2000. It was a very easy to use virtual studio. The first version was really simple. It was based on assembly and Java as well, and we were dynamically compiling the code. We were very proud of that. So you would place on a sort of small rack your instruments and effects, and then the compilation will go on, and then you will be in this virtual studio, as we said. And you could play using pattern-based, pattern-based composition tool where you will play patterns and looping, and you will change patterns on the fly, and you could program breaks, etc., and build a song quite quickly.
It's hard for us to remember now quite how difficult it was in the early days of software synthesis, because CPU resources really were not as abundant as they are now. So you had to resort to creative programming measures like you did with Storm.
Yeah, absolutely. You had those technical issues. You had also some concerns by potential users. You know, will that work? Will that stand the test of performance? How much can I do, etc., and you're right, it was really different times. So, but already there was something coming out from the computers, and of course ahead of this generation of products, there were already the sequencers, the digital audio workstations, and people could see the benefit of the computer. But we tried to make a step further by making the instruments and the effects more visible in the system, let's say, and making that very simple.
Well, Storm survived several versions in a number of years, but you quite quickly turned to developing plugins for other DAWs. What was the decision there? What made you realize that was going to be the future?
Well, we're very influenced by a Stanford teacher called Jeffrey Moore, who wrote several books called Crossing the Chasm and Inside Tornado, etc. And what Jeffrey Moore said was there's going to be one major player when there is a disruption in industry. For example, if you look at OS, I'll say Microsoft became the key player, or Word became the key player, Excel, etc. You can look at other industries, and he sort of theorized that and explained that if you're not this key player, it's going to be difficult. So we looked at the industry, and there were a couple of very strong contenders. There were Reason, Propelhead. They were ahead of us for different reasons, let's say. And there were others. There was already FL Studio. There was a product called Orion, etc. And at some point, we thought it's too difficult to have the entire company rely on this one product, especially if we're not going to be the solution people turn themselves to in regard to making music easily on their computer. And when we thought it was clear, then we will not be this key solution for the market, we thought it was time to move to something else. And by chance, we had someone for 1 year working on different algorithms. So we would look at what software instrument we could be doing. And based on this set of algorithms that we call TAE, To Emulation, we decided to make the Moog Modular.
So that's a pretty ambitious point to start with, emulating classic analog synths.
Yeah, that's right. That was probably the most ambitious we could do at the time. The modularity was, of course, calling for a sort of complexity. At the same time, it was the first real synth coming to market. in the early 60s. And we felt it was a good point to start. We also felt it was going beyond anything you could find on the market, because there were a couple of software instruments already. There was the Model E, for example, by Steinberg. And we thought we're going to bring something nobody else offers. And, then the cables, the way to patch, the modules, the cables were, that was a big thing, were moving when you were patching, etc. So there was some sort of visual hook and a statement also that made this product different and successful instantaneously.
So how did the manufacturers of the original hardware, how did they react when you started to produce these software emulations of their products?
Well, with the Moog Modular and then the MiniMoog, we had an agreement with Bob Moog and Moog Music. So we came to him early on. We asked for permission. He said, I want to be part of that. We worked together on what the product will be. And when eventually Bob Moog considered it was right or right enough, he allowed us to release the product with his permission and his endorsement as well. And that helped a lot. And then as for other manufacturers, it's been very different depending on the company. A company like Yamaha has been very benevolent. We've asked for permission. And I remember there was a case we were at Musikmesse and a couple of a member of the Yamaha Corporation, three staff members came and said, all right, we've analyzed your request. It took 6 months, something like that. And they said, we cannot say we're okay, but we cannot say we're not okay. And I said, what does that mean? I said, as I repeated, so we don't say we're okay, we don't say we're not okay. And offline, they said, it means you can do it. We will never say anything. And, we said, can we thank you, in the foreign note, can we mention that we are grateful for Yamaha to at least make the unit at first. And they spent another couple of months and they said, yes, you can thank us.
Wow, the wheels move slowly.
Yeah. But it's been, for the CMI, we went to Cameron Jones. I mean, it depends. And there are cases where we did without any permission. There are cases, I will have to look back at all the history. But of course, it's a long history now.
And how much of this development, when you're emulating a classic instrument, how much of the development is based on analysis of the circuit and how much of it is based on just listening?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard for me to answer exactly because I'm not doing it so much now, but it's really a combination of the two. It's our capacity to analyze the circuitry. Now we do a lot of machine learning as well, and we have over the years advanced our DSP capabilities. But I feel it's really this gathering, this meeting of the engineer and the sound designer, the person who's going to use it and understand that makes the instrument really good. It cannot only be the analytical and technical part. It has to come also down to how you're going to use it. So I'm not able to comment further. I don't know exactly how I could present that mix and to what extent each one has a role.
So for several years after you launched the Moog Modular, you produced a number of emulations of other classic analog synthesizers. And then in 2006, we had the first, I believe, Arturia physical modeling instrument, which was brass. And that was developed in collaboration with the IRCAM Research Institute. Was that a very different process for you?
Yes, quite different. We had to work with them on different things. They are much more evolved and they are sort of state-owned research agency, shall I say. So yeah, they have their own constraints on signing agreements, on intellectual property, on the management of the project, etc., etc. They're very strong. They're amazing. And then they come down with a technology like brass, which was really outstanding, which is outstanding. And then, of course, it never really finished everything perfectly well, to be honest. So there were still a couple of bugs, and it was very hard to get the company, Arturia, and IRCAM aligned on the very last step of the project. But, we brought the product to market still. A lot of people used it and enjoyed it, but there were still a few things we wanted to bring further. We worked on another version called Woodwind. We spent a few years on that, and eventually we could not make it right. And despite the work we were doing together with their sort of young PhDs and a couple of researchers on the program, we decided to give up. And eventually we also discontinued brass, even if really to play brass sounds, it was really, really amazing. But it was also different. I mean, the trumpet and the trombone were really, really great. The saxophone, there was always this question on some of the articulation and some of the ways of playing, of how you can present the tongue, etc. And we never found really a way to do that perfectly well, to be honest.
So did you then take the decision to bring most of your development in-house after that?
We do both. Most of them are in-house. Really, let's say, I would say 95% of them, compared to other companies where they are relying much more on independent software houses. We are really one where we try to do things ourselves. But sometimes there is a technology or something we don't know how to do and someone does really well, and we turn to them and see if we can do it together.
And then after brass, there was another very ambitious project from Arturia, which was your first hardware instrument, the Origin. That must have been quite a risk for you to take as a company.
Yes, we were young, we didn't know. I think there's a saying like that from I think the founder of Xerox said something like, had we known, we will never have started it, but we didn't know, so we started and we eventually did it. And that's exactly what happened. Had we known the complexity of making hardware, and especially this piece of gear, which was so ambitious, we tried to, and we did make a sort of Frankenstein synthesizer where you could mix and match oscillators, filters from different synths from the past. And that's a very beautiful thing we built there. And the product got a lot of recognition. It's still used by many artists. We see it sometimes on stage. We have pictures of different artists using it. From a financial standpoint, it never really brought back the investment we made, but this is what allowed us to become also a hardware manufacturer. It took us, I guess, 6 years to get the product released. But, eventually it came to market. It's very hardly, very tough days for the company. And yes, we were not so strong in management, to be honest. So when you don't know, you take risks because you don't know. So eventually this is how we made it.
So what did you learn from this process? You must have learned an awful lot.
Yes, that was really a teaching moment. I mean, a long moment, but a very teaching long moment where we learned to be more careful when deciding what to do and specifying products. What we tried to do was good marketing. We went to different places, ran focus groups, asked users what they wanted. And then we tried to pour everything into the product and to have all the features they were expecting. So the product became bigger and bigger and more exciting for sure, but much harder to do and potentially more complex to use, potentially more complex to maintain. So, we learned to be delivering something that was meaningful and not everything people wanted. That's probably the first thing. And then we learned how to do hardware. And that's, of course, very different from software. We learned everything about industrialization and quality and management of stock and ordering of parts and all the tests that you have to do in the factories, et cetera, et cetera. And this has evolved, of course, since then. But the step, the gap we had to get through was pretty large. So yeah, tough moment.
And once you had this hardware expertise, of course, you then took another very ambitious and brave step, which was to launch an analog synth.
Yeah, exactly. That's, where, it feels like when I'm listening to you, I feel like we were all over the place. But it's true that we have always had a hard time resisting the temptation of doing things that we're excited by. And while we were doing Origin, we were looking at this market that we knew, of course, through our creation of analog synthesizers. And we felt there is potentially a larger group of people interested in analog than what we can tell right now, because there are not so many manufacturers. Products are quite expensive. They are mainly distributed in sort of boutique stores, and they're not so easy to use as well. So we felt if we were able to do something that will be beyond 500 euros, and if we were offering something unique, different, easy to use, probably there will be a large group of people. And again, we took that risk. We created MiniBrute. We decided to go bold. I remember when we decided on the format, the 25 keys, the sort of square very flat product, not long like the 49 or 61 or even 37 you will find usually with analog synths. We said, okay, if we do it, let's do it really to the full extent of what it is. Let's make sure this is this sort of beefy Steiner-Parker filter-based plus bird factor synthesizers that will be unique in some way. And we made it, and it was successful. So, that was a good news.
But at that time, of course, there were no analog synthesizers in mass production. So you must have had to almost reinvent the process of building these things on scale.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were early on. We were helped, to be honest. There is someone outside the company called Yves who is very good with analog synthesizer, and he's by chance living very close to here in Grenoble. He helped us a lot. We work with designers like Axel Hartmann. They helped as well. He helped as well because he knew better. We had people in the company using a lot of analog synthesizers, and they understood that quite well. Of course, we had a couple of good engineers in terms of analog, and we grew that. But that's true that the parts back then and everything, that was a bit mysterious. We were looking at the competition, and they were getting their parts sometime from the USA or Europe, and we were already thinking of doing it in China for the sake of cost. So the parts sometimes were very different from what we were needing. And yes, we had to work a lot on that. And we had to work with the factories and make sure they understood. And it was hard also on the quality control side because you cannot use sort of automated tests so easily on analog. Now we have progressed a lot. With our latest release, we're able to use a lot of different testing techniques. But back then, we had to test everything by hand. And even there, it's not always 100% certain you're going to be right. So it was a sort of craftsmanship ported into factories, and that was something.
And as you said, the MiniBrute was an original design. It wasn't like any analog synth that had gone before, which I guess must have been not what people would have expected, since a lot of your software instruments were very faithful recreations of analog synthesizers. Have you never been tempted to make a new MiniMoog or a new SH101 or something like that?
In hardware format, not really, because we felt that software was covering the needs. Also, the original manufacturers didn't want us to. If you look at those brands you just mentioned, they were not for it. And of course, when we had the agreement for doing software, we agreed that we will not do hardware. And even in the agreement with Moog Music, for example, we said we will, they especially very clearly mentioned that we should not do any controller looking like a MiniMoog. I remember this was one of their fears, that someone came with a controller and a piece of software and eventually competed with their own solutions. So yes, we could not for this reason, but we were not too much into that. We felt that we had to do our own analog or software recreation, but not necessarily a hardware recreation.
And around this time, you also diversified into producing synths for iPad and iOS. Has that platform lived up to your expectations since?
Not really. What we did was to work with third-party companies that came to us and said, you've got this software on the computers that works well and we like. Could we make an iPad version for you? And we shared the revenues. And we said, okay, let's do it. So we worked with them on certain particularities of the portage, on the interface, etc., etc. And this is how we got started. There was one that we did spend more time on is iSpark, which was the portage on the iOS of Spark. And this one was calling for more work from our hand. But eventually it was more the other companies working on this development on iPad than Arturia. And the revenues have never been huge. I think this platform did not become what we were thinking it could be. Musicians still prefer the computer. What we got from it was exposure. I think the fact that we were on the App Store helped. And we still sold, I don't have the numbers in mind, but thousands for sure, maybe tens of thousands, which turned into very little revenues. But, and maybe it's 100,000 over the years, maybe a couple of 100,000, I'm not sure. But eventually it's 100,000 people still, knowing what you do and seeing your product. So this part was useful.
Interesting. So it's almost like a shop window rather than a revenue generator in its own right.
Exactly. It's a sort of marketing tool probably for us, yeah.
So after the origin, you took I think a conscious decision to make hardware products that would be affordable, most notably the MiniBrute. And then came the MatrixBrute, which was, again, another hugely ambitious product. At this point, were you confident that you could pull this off second time around?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Maybe we were foolish again, or again we did not understand the stakes or the magnitude of what we were doing. But yes, we had much more control, much more understanding of how to do it right, and we were interested in how we could turn a modular instrument into something easier with presets. And we were looking at different options. Even with cables, how can we make a modular synth with presets, even with cables? And then came this idea of using the Matrix. That eventually was right, because the Matrix allowed to do many things. We can record presets using the Matrix. We can program modulation using the Matrix. We can program sequences using the Matrix. And even visually, the association of the Matrix that reminds of Push, for example, from Ableton, and the analog section sort of made a statement that we were coming with the next generation analog, where you had this pure analog circuitry, and on the side of that you had this matrix, which was sort of epitomizing the possibilities brought by digital as well. And we made this, I think, nice design again with Axel, and that worked well for us. And it took us time, for sure, but that started, really strengthening the ideas that Arturia was a serious analog synthesizer manufacturer with a sound of their own and the direction they will stick to.
And of course, the Matrix also harks back to instruments like the VCS3 with its pin matrix. So there is a classic tradition in synthesis of this kind of modulation matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave Smith had made also things himself, etc. We did not invent that. We came still at the time, and I remember we were, having a discussion by the famous coffee machine where everything seems to be happening, and we were thinking, again, how can we do this modular with patches? And one of our engineers, Robert Bocquier, who's just retired, he came and said, I read about this new component where you could do a matrix easily, and that gave us the idea. Eventually, we did not use the component itself, but this, taking it from the technical angle, drew us to making the product this way, and that was quite cool. And we have, even the latest one in the MiniFreak, MicroFreak, or the PolyBrute, we have kept this matrix because it's really convenient. And when we look at how people use it, we feel it's really empowering for them. Even if we like the cables, and we like also the sort of fixed patch like a MiniMoog where you don't necessarily need a matrix. We feel this is very empowering as well, and this instantaneity is great. But for widening the sound palette, and again maybe at the cost of a sort of instant feel and touch and gratification, we have the impression that the matrix is the best choice.
Absolutely, but I guess there's always this playoff that you have to make between ease of use and depth in the design of any synthesizer.
Exactly. That's what we spend a lot of time on. How much should we put in the depths at the cost of maybe the start, where people will feel like, wow, this is intimidating and I'm not getting it and I don't feel good about myself while using this product. And how much we need to put at first, like, welcome. This is easy. Things are going to be, simple for you to get. But then potentially there is not the depth there could be. So there are a lot of debates about that here in the company. I'm always the one saying, if people don't embark at first, why do we do it? And others say yes, but if they embark and then it's disappointing, why we do it? So these are the discussions we have.
How much research do you do into how people use your products?
More and more. We meet with musicians, we travel to see them, we look at the ways they work. To be honest, we are engineers. I mean, Gilles, we were two at start, and myself, we are two engineers. The culture is very much a culture of engineers, and we tend to forget about users. So we love discussing features, we love different specs, and sometimes we say, yeah, and by the way, who is using? So now we're really pushing, seeing the other way around, and looking first at who are the users, who are the potential customers, what are their needs, what do they use, how they live, etc., etc. And this is a growing change in our approach. So we have user seminars 3 times a year now, while we used to have product seminars. And we travel to different places to check how and some come here and we just witness how they're going to use the products, etc. It's very useful. It's always, again, we have to be careful because you cannot leave everything in the hands of the users, as surprisingly as it sounds. But sometimes you have also to push a vision despite the immediate reactions. And finding the right balance is a sort of magic.
And have you ever been surprised at how people were using one of your products?
I'm trying to remember. This is a good question as well, because there are famous cases where sometimes people are using products very differently from what you can imagine. We have one case that is funny. We have this controller called BeatStep, which is both a controller and a sequencer. We sold something like 70 units to a Wall Street firm where they had brokers and they had to pass orders very quickly. And they were using the BeatStep to, I guess they were putting stickers on the pads to execute the orders very, very quickly. And that was funny because we never thought they would use that. I don't know how they made it, but maybe there was a musician in the company, and we wanted to go there, take some pictures, understand really, but we never did.
Well, then maybe there's a new direction there for financial controller hardware.
Potentially, yes.
And talking of new directions, some Arturia products have famously spent a long time in development. None more so than your first audio interface, the Audio Fused, which finally appeared in 2017. But it seems like it must have taken an awful lot of work to get that right.
Yeah, it did. Again, one of those daring projects where we decided to embark on something new. We felt it made sense for us, and we still think it does, because we have software and we need to get the sound out of the computer. We have hardware, we need to get the sound into the computer as well. And we wanted to do it our way, and we did Audio Fuse. It took maybe 4 or 5 years to do it. We announced too early, as it used to happen in a few years ago. And eventually, also the fact that we were using discrete technology for the board made it more complex. But we feel in the end better. We named that Discrete Pro to sort of label this technology of discrete circuitry, allowing to have a higher sound quality, even if now the audio interfaces are offering such high quality that it does not make so much difference when you compare the sort of premium audio interfaces with each other. So yeah, we spent some time on that, but then out of that we did several audio interfaces, the latest one being Audio Fuse 16 rig, which is serving our core user groups, people who have synths, etc. And we did also the Mini Fuse, and that's a good complement to our line, because we need also products with rotation, with more volume. We need to be seen in certain stores, consumer electronics, for example. You have that in certain countries where they open for the music industry. That's not true for any country, but in the Middle East, for example, etc. And having audio interfaces by or controller keyboards help us a lot to enter those stores.
And for a company like Arturia that is very well known for one thing, say synthesizers, is it then hard to become accepted in a slightly different market sector like audio interfaces?
I think yes, especially since our competition is of high quality and very high reputation. We're talking about companies that have sometimes 50 years in the making of audio interfaces. So, they have reputation, dealers have habits. Also, audio interfaces are equipment. They're not collector. It's like since you may buy a new one, you may have 10, but if there's a new one coming that is exciting, you may buy it. Audio interface, maybe you have one, and that's enough. You don't need. So people are, if they have something working well, they will keep it. Dealers, if they feel that it's less risky to recommend the sort of key player or major player in the industry, they will push this one. But still, you have ways to enter, and it's what is difficult also when you look at lower end audio interfaces like the MiniFuse. It's very hard to find differentiation because the price is so important and everyone has pretty much access to the same thing. So to bring that, you really have to think deeply to look for options on such things like design and quality and sometimes the software bundle, etc. But it's not like you're going to bring with AudioFuse 16 rig. It's quite unique. And different, and the ergonomics, everything we brought makes it really, really, I think, superior for those group, those people who need to connect a lot of synths, etc. But with a lower end audio interface, it's much harder.
And to return to synthesizers, as we've said, a lot of the Arturia software synthesizers have been emulations of classic instruments. But then in 2019, you launched Pigments, which is kind of your own soft synth. What did you think was missing from the world of soft synths at that point?
We felt that recreating the classic synthesizers did not always allow us to take the most of the computer interface and the new ways you can program sounds. So, of course, we had to be faithful to the original machines, and that's something people appreciate. But for modulation, we thought there were other things to do. There were maybe ways to have on one page most of your needs and still offer more, sound techniques and synthesis options, etc., etc. And we came with Pigments, which is in a sense our own interpretation of what modern synths can be on the computer.
And then we can't leave this podcast without talking about the PolyBrute, which I think is one of the most desirable polysynths ever made. But also, by the time you introduced this in 2020, there's already quite a lot of competition in the world of high-end polysynths. How did you make it stand out from the crowd?
Well, a lot of work. The quality, I think really we have a good team for that. It's very classic for traditional for CEOs, whatever, to say my team's great. It's cost less than a pay raise, but in our case, it's true. I mean, they are really, really strong people. They're passionate. They really spend time making sure things work well. Yes, I think it's mostly them. I mean, if between Sebastian, Bruno, Thierry, I'm just mentioning their names because they are really strong people. And then again, we try to innovate where we could. So the Morphing is a great way to go from one sound to the other. The quality of the circuitry, the choice of the components that we learned from analyzing all the classic synthesizers from the past, but also our experiences with the MiniBrute and MatrixBrute and DrumBrute, etc. All that helped a lot as well. Many years of experience from this group of people, and I agree. I mean, PolyBrute is outstanding. We're going to come with something quite cool soon in the sort of evolution of PolyBrute, and it's it's hard to say that it can be cooler because PolyBrute is so strong and cool, but I think it's even stronger. So you'll see that. It's exciting. You feel it's so exciting that I can hardly prevent myself from saying too much.
Well, by the time this podcast comes out, I hope we'll be able to talk about the very latest thing that I know of, which is the Arturia AstroLab, because this, in some ways, this could be seen as the descendant of that original origin.
That's true. That's the sort of same dream. I mean, and we started with Origin. Eventually, that was not the right approach or what we want to do. But AstroLab is. It's really 25 years in the making, in a sense. It's all our assets into this one very easy to use stage keyboard that is made for playing, for exploring through a large amount of sounds, for tweaking sounds, with access to 10 different sort of synthesis, to 34 different instruments ranging from, we mentioned MiniMrute to the piano, from Pigments that you just referenced us to whatever, the Fender Rhodes, etc., etc. And you have ways to look for sound by types, bass leads by those instruments, by artists as well. So it's really a machine about exploring, finding sounds, and then tweaking sounds. And the beauty of it is that you can then edit the sounds on your computer, on the original instrument, like the Moog Modular, for example. And then you can port back this sound onto the hardware. You've got an app as well on your phone that you can use to sort out sound, prepare playlist, have something on stage to tweak or setting the parameters right. So really, it's about ubiquity. It's an instrument that should allow musicians to do what they want, where they want. Should you be in your studio? Should you be in the subway preparing your playlist or checking new sounds from the sound stores? Or should you be on stage? AstroLab, we have tried to put the right features each time for your particular needs, and not too much.
I think some musicians have been burned over the years by other instruments that were essentially an embedded PC running soft synths. But I gather you've taken a slightly different approach with the design of the AstroLab.
Yeah, it's very different. We did not try to bring the features of our software on this keyboard. We try to offer an event, in a sense, a new experience that is really the one you want, we feel, from a keyboard, and leave away everything that is maybe better to do on the computer, and not try to do the same thing on the computer and on the hardware. So this is why Origin, again, you'll see there is limited controls. There are 4 controls on the sound of the instrument, or the multi, and 4 controls on the effect, really. And then you can select sounds through buttons and through a sort of advanced navigation wheel, because we feel simplicity is more and more important. We have too much technology around. It's tiring. It's everything calls for syncing or Wi-Fi, whatever, etc. And there is a limit to what we can do. So we want to bring back the joy of playing sounds, exploring, tweaking, etc. And if you want to do more, great, go on Analogue Lab and you can sort out sound, try new sound, you can edit sound, edit the effects much in depth, to the extent that you can go to the very root of the sounds themselves. And some people will, and some people will never use the software in the computer, and that's fine, that's great. Maybe they come back from work and they don't want to use the computer again, and still they have access to thousands of sounds from yesterday and tomorrow. Because on this keyboard, you've got sounds from Pigments, all the sounds you get on the computer today, because there are so many options with granular synthesis or additive, etc., and you don't have yet on hardware, because it's not feasible on traditional hardware boards, or not something that certain companies will look at because they don't need to. And their customers are fine with sample-based or wavetables.
And the AstroLab is being sold as a stage keyboard, which I suppose is another new direction for Arturia. It's keyboards for live performance, live instruments. Are we going to see more from you in this department?
Yes. We feel, first, we like, what you find on stage. And then when you find a nice Nord, when you find a MiniMoog or, Safari, whatever, all those products you find on stage. Still, we'd like to be seen more often on stage. It's cool when you are watching TV or whatever, going to a concert with your family and you feel, oh, wow, that's us. So it's not, I'm not saying we're doing that out of some sort of need to be more visible or I don't know, need to be recognized further. But yes, it's nice to be on stage. For us, it's a statement that, our products are sturdy. You can, they're made to stand the test of really performance on stage. And also it's a discipline, because on stage things have to be, to the point. They have to be simple, they have to be clear and straight, and you have to make sure things work. So it's an approach we wanted to take with these products. Because again, in the studio, your computer is fine, and potentially with your Keylab or Keylab Essential, which are, the controllers we make along Analogue Lab or V Collection, you have a lot of options. So why would you need a dedicated piece of hardware? I think you do if you want a different experience where everything is made for you to express yourself, enjoy, play, go from studio to stage without the traditional boundaries you will see there.
And in the end, that's what it comes down to for all of us, really, isn't it? The joy of making music. Yeah,
exactly. That's so important. Our goal is for every user of ours to be happy and fulfilled, and enjoying herself or himself when playing with our instruments, and that's our goal. So yes.
Well, the success of Arturia suggests that you're doing it right. Congratulations again on the anniversary. That really is quite an achievement when you think about how many companies come and go in the audio industry. Really very impressive indeed. And as we can't talk about it on this podcast, but I have seen a little into the roadmap for what's coming from Arturia in the next year or two, and it's pretty exciting. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, Frédéric. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And be sure to check out the show notes page for this episode, where you'll find further information along with web links and details of all the other episodes. And just before you go, let me point you to the soundonsound.com/podcasts website page, where you can explore what's playing on our other channels.